Hey everyone, Keris here, and welcome to Fitter Food Radio. So we don't have Matt today. We have got Hamish here, but I've actually got two guests that I'm really excited to introduce you to. I have Oliver and Rebecca, and they have a company called Soul Energies, which I came across when I started my journey with meditation. And the reason I was really keen to get them on the podcast, I've actually mentioned them before, was it was the first, Oliver in particular, I found your meditations first, but then I've also devoured all the information on your websites, followed you on social media, both of you, and really love the fact that you work as a couple. Obviously, that really resonates with Matt and I as we run a business together. But you've really been a huge part of not just starting my journey with meditation, but helping me to continue with it. And from there have come so many other things. And I really see you both. I'm so excited. I'm going to get you to do an introduction in a moment, but I see you both as a bit of a bridge towards, I don't want to call it, we've had a discussion off camera about spirituality, but really just connection and consciousness and really kind of working through issues that I think are causing a lot of kind of emotional and mental health issues today in society. So I'm going to stop waffling and ask you both to introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit about you and then just how you came to start Soul Energies together.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Keris. So I'm Oliver, one half of Soul Energies, and
And I'm Rebecca.
yeah, so we're based in Exmouth in Devon. We work with people one-on-one. Obviously, you've seen some of our online content, and we also deliver sound baths up and down the Southwest. So, in a nutshell, that's what we do. I think the invitation of this is to sort of give you a bit of a under the hood look at what we think we do, because there's always this forward facing element of the work and how you communicate that. But really, we're both quite stubborn in the sense it really means quite a lot to us. So it's just such a fantastic opportunity to be on here today and tell you a little bit more about that.
I think one of the issues that we have actually, when I was writing a kind of few ideas of what we could talk about and some questions, was I really struggled with language because what I want to communicate to people, and this is one of the chats we just had on just before we started recording, was the meditations and some of the practices that I've worked through with you have helped me find a sense of peace, a sense of calmness. And through that, I've been able to look at kind of beliefs and emotions that I wasn't really liking about myself and drop them out because I kind of basically slowed down, became more conscious. And then I also started to see kind of future things that I was fearing that weren't necessarily going to happen. And again, I was able to release some of those and then develop tools to across my day start to think about, well, what do I want to embody? Who do I want to be? What makes me feel really, really good? And why am I not always, I love the idea of being this very kind, big-hearted person, but sometimes I find myself just absolutely rollicking the dog or snapping at Matt. And I'm like, why am I doing that? And I think what we said, Rebecca, I'd love you to just repeat what we said offline, because I see both of you as when I looked at the words that you wrote, the language you used, it really spoke to me and it didn't feel like I needed to change outfits, change my hair, maybe stop using deodorant, use crystals, some of the things that we associate with our believing in a higher power, spirituality, all of these terms. And again, I feel very lucky that you made it non-intimidating for me and very realistic as well in kind of the world that we live in. So, Rebecca, I'd love you to repeat what you said about.
Yeah, no pressure. So, um, like recently, I've really moved away from kind of describing myself as a spiritual person, or even the work that we do is spiritual, because there's so much glitter and tinsel and preconceived ideas around what it means to be spiritual. And for me and for us, and really what we share with people, and this isn't even in work, this is something that we really live in our day to day, is that invitation to firstly feel welcome, and that the whole point of this is to really kind of just be a rock solid human being and have as much love and presence as we possibly can and experience. And that can sometimes be in conflict with the conditions and the transactions that we have within our lives, and also how we feel about ourselves. And the whole point is that it is our messy, chaotic, imperfect expression of being human that really is the sum and total of our experience. That is what makes it real. And we're here for the real people, aren't we? And we talk about that all day long. And I think that that's why what we do is received so well, because it just makes it okay. And I think that that's what people are really looking for, is to feel real, to know that they're alive, and that there is some sense to this thing that we call life, which is just so trippy at the moment.
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oliver, do you want to add anything to that in terms of?
I mean, no, not really. It's 100% on the mark, I'd say. I think the only thing I would add in making and landing that dream real for ourselves and the people we work with, testament to the human factor is probably the largest determining factor of how well somebody can incorporate an understanding that they're more than just their body, essentially, is their human support network. You can be as spiritual as you like and do all the meditations in the world, but the thing that's going to make the biggest difference and the resource that you're going to draw upon most is your fellow humans around you. So it's just testament to the fact that it's maybe not as complicated, or the lifestyle approach to spirituality is definitely one that we got very bored with very quickly, because we don't fit any bracket or template. We're both quite, I hasten to say, extreme characters, but we have a spectrum of expression that can't really be contained by namaste or
No, we're quite rebellious in that sense. I've had this idea for this blog that it's brewing, but it's called The Unlikely Goddess, because I don't rock around in the pastel dresses, all the earthy tones, or bless my water, or any of that.
I mean, you do bless your water, you just don't make a meal of it. It becomes part of your day to day, doesn't it? So it's a very different approach.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, I think when I first came across you, Oliver, was just one of the meditation apps. And I had been trying for nearly a year to get into meditation and breath work. And I was sitting there and I was doing it. And then I was just going, I feel no different. Just this loud, chattery mind. I made some big lifestyle shifts, moved to Portugal, and again, thought, being between the mountains and the sea, now this is where the magic's going to happen. But same chattering mind, just couldn't stop that dialogue. And it was actually, I don't even really know when the penny dropped. I felt quite ill and decided that just slowed me down. I decided to listen to, actually, it was at that point that I found your meditation. And this is a very random coincidence, but you have the same voice as my doctor back in the UK, who was very kind to me when I was sick. And when all the other consultants I saw were pretty rude and gaslighting and not very kind, he would sit with me for sometimes 45 minutes, which for a GP is amazing, trying to help me find some answers. And he did a similar thing with Matt. And when I played your meditation to Matt, I said, who does this sound like? He was like, oh my God, it's Dr. H. And so your voice really put my nervous system at ease. Then I started to be able to listen, and then it was the words you used. And I noticed in some of your descriptions, you talked about being an anxiety or helping people through anxiety. I can't remember if you labeled yourself as an anxiety coach, but straight away that really kind of confirmed for me that I was in a state of general anxiety most of the time, and I didn't even know it. And that's what the chattering mind was. And again, I try not to label myself now, but I was like, okay, so that's the story that, or a lot of what is going on in my mind is kind of a noise that I'm creating. So if I just focus, and I used a lot of your meditations tied in with Joe Dispenza's work, which I was reading at the time. The problem was when I put Joe Dispenza on, it was like, I don't know if you've ever been in a gym to like an upbeat Les Mills body pump class. It felt like that. And I was kind of like, feel it. And it just wasn't me. And I was like, oh. Whereas you just seem to have this very calm paced, and you'd be like, your mind's gone now, hasn't it? You're chattering. And I'll be like, how does he know? So yeah. And also there's a lot of, I think you give permission to people in your meditations and some of your coaching sessions, to not be so kind of you get very kind of, I must meditate every day and I have to be 100% conscious, and like there are just days it does not happen, it doesn't go right, and you often explain that. But then you've also, for me, dangled a few carrots in things like saying you don't really have a sense of humor if you're not conscious and trying to be in the moment. And I was like, God, that's so true. I haven't laughed for about 10 years. I'm not a funny person, but I used to be when I wasn't, you know, kind of so much stress in life and in my head. So I think a lot of the things that you've coached me personally, and I'm sure you have a lot of clients who feed this back, it's like you've said, you're just coaching us back to being our kind of ourselves in a way that we always were, but also going forward very strong, resilient human beings that are very connected to themselves. So I'm very grateful.
Oh, thank you. It's lovely to have that feedback. I think, you know, what you're talking about is at the core of our kind of work ethic and value system, because we personally in our individual journeys have gone through all sorts of experiences and organizations and places where you think you have to add more to yourself to succeed or be accepted. And I think the way that we work and the message that we carry is very much born out of our own personal journey, some of that involving quite a lot of pain, I guess, as well, but also the sort of logic that comes with, you know, laughter and coming from the heart. In order to laugh at yourself, you have to come outside of yourself and go, ha, there I am, and find it funny. And then immediately you're bigger than you were before. And it's just always that onioning that you sometimes just need a friendly or a non-judgmental presence to really drop into. Safety seems to be a real, you know, core factor in that. And it's a bit like working out. You know, you can punish yourself working out, twisting your nervous system into different shapes and modes when it's not what the body wants to do, really, because that is not strength, because you're always trying to adapt into a form that isn't essentially you. It's always going to spring back. You're always going to have some kickback.
Yeah,
for sure.
I was going to say, it was interesting when I did actually find you on social media, you were skipping, and I was like, oh, I didn't expect that of a meditation teacher. That's completely mental on my behalf. Like, again, I was like looking for the crystals and the other thing, you know, I was like, oh, okay. Like, and one of the things that helped me was I actually dropped out, as someone who loves fitness and is a nutritionist, I actually dropped, the food side has always been consistent, but I dropped out training whilst I was actually trying to focus on this a bit more because I didn't want distraction. And now it's coming back into my life for a very different reason. I think I did it before because I needed the endorphins. I really needed to give me, like, I need to feel good. I need energy. And obviously it's tied into body image, which is, I think, is a big part of your journey. I'd love to know a little bit more actually about your kind of personal journeys and how you did end up in this place.
So mine is a very long story, so I will try and keep it
the abridged version.
Short and sweet. So mine, basically, I was always really, really sensitive as a kid, very, very intuitive. Some might say psychic. I always had an awareness of the other. And when I realized as a teenager that not everybody kind of saw the things that I did, and, you know, kind of realized that that side of me wasn't very welcome, I decided that I was gonna shut that down. So if you fast forward then on to, you know, 5 or 6 years, I've excluded my intuition and my guidance system, suppressed my truth, and I end up getting really, really poorly. At 18, they thought that I had a stroke, and I ended up with a really rare neurological disorder that took 6 years to diagnose. I ended up being addicted to pain relief, really depressed. I had a string of really bad and abusive relationships, and it was 2014, and I'd had my second baby, and there was just like this nagging feeling. It literally felt like spirit was banging on the door, being like, hello, we're here. Come on, come and talk to us. Come and talk to us. And I ended up going and just doing like a taster course in like massage and reflexology. And in the second session, I put my hands on somebody's feet, and it was like one of those moments where I had like full body remembrance. She immediately burst into tears, and I realized that I could just recall like her whole life story, and I knew exactly how she felt and what had happened and all the rest of it. And that really landed me back on the path of sorting myself out first and foremost, and delving back into all the things that I was ready to remember. And of course, as we walk back into that path, lots of things change as we change our inner world, so our outer world begins to reflect that. So I ended up leaving a relationship. I ended up moving to Exmouth, or back to Exmouth, I should say, because I grew up here, and started my business, which is now our business. I met Oliver, and we started a shop, and it just went on from there. And it's really, I was always that annoying kid that asked why. Why? And I would never, just because they're an adult, I wouldn't believe them without checking in with myself first. And in that sense, I guess I'm like quite stubborn and rebellious. But I think that innate seeker of truth that's within me, coupled with my devotion to love, because that's really all I care about, is love, is really kind of what has led me deeper into my own self, deeper with my relationship with Oliver, and also deeper with the world around me. And that's what I truly love to share with people in treatment, is for them to build their own relationship with themselves and the world around them. And because health and happiness is a natural byproduct of that knowing. So that's my story.
Love that. I love that.
I'll give you the abridged version of mine. I think my story could be one of really just dissolving the molds that I thought I had to fit to satisfy the personal desire and drive to be seen and to have impact. I think once upon a time, when I first started with spirituality and Reiki, for example, it was a pathway into, like Bex was sharing about the sense of knowing and feeling slightly, not slightly, quite heavily, that your perception is very different to those around you, but not having the vocabulary or the community to support and articulate that and understand it within your own body. So my whole journey has been one of challenging my preconceptions about myself, my preconceptions about how things can be done. And like Bex, also very much a rebellious spirit, in the sense that I had to learn that I couldn't define myself in opposition to something I didn't agree with. That's sort of a pathway you're given quite young. If you want to protest or you want to disagree or you want to argue, that's seen as something which is like worthy of reward. And very slowly, it just became very unrewarding to me personally. So making an impact through what I do is also about obviously being that channel, as however you describe it in that vocabulary, helping people key into that higher part of themselves. But honestly, it feels like my journey is in several parts, but the richness has really come in this later part of my life over the last 10 years or 8 or even 5 years, where the uniting of being of service, being of the world, being here for your fellow humanity, but also being here for you. And that message and the way that you deliver that message, at least for me, is enriching and nourishing for myself also, rather than seeing like I'm some sort of vigilante. You know, I've got to enjoy what I'm doing. And that really has been, if you were to ask me, that's how I answered today. It's always a different answer to that question, because I'm always looking at my journey in a different way. But currently, that's sort of the richest field of exploration that I'm currently on. How can I make it work for me? And how can I disprove any preconception that you have to be a martyr, or you have to exhaust yourself, or, it really can be a closed loop. And that's just been so beautiful to work out with Bex in relationship to, and also obviously like with our family and kids and that sort of outer community into our extended family too, which has been
very unconventional and breaking generational patterns left, right, and center.
Has that gone down well?
I'd say for the most part it has. I think that our family look to us as an example of some of the feelings that they have within them that they also find hard within their own journey. I mean, I look at our youngest daughter, Ren, and she's like a higher octave of, wanting to scream gobbledygook and make up songs and get naked, and that's all stuff that I'm into, but I can just see that she's like another level, so I can only imagine in retrospect what it must have been like for my parents, born in the 60s, post-war. We're all trying our best here, and I think it's that when you sort of return to prioritizing your own physical, like felt enjoyment of your life, you then do start to have a lot more grace within your thinking and within your body and your nervous system, which brings a higher understanding of, key people in your life and their journey too, and not carrying some of that resentment. And
yeah, you get to appreciate them,
yeah,
and enjoy them.
Yeah, that was actually one of my questions, because I think as you do the work on yourself and start to see like, okay, where did I get that belief from? Okay, that was obviously an experience or something that's passed down through my family as a generational belief, and then you let it go, but then obviously you meet for dinner and it's back in force over the dinner table, and I'm like, do I try it and argue back? And I'm definitely finding peace with it. Sometimes I'll just make a point. Sometimes I'll just opt out of a conversation that's just gone like on this negative round that I'm like, I can feel my stomach tensing if we go here. Like, let's just and sometimes I've just sat there and gone, come back to breath, and like I've just tuned out a little bit but one thing that I actually did recently, this is a friend suggested this, was because it's interesting what you said about your parents, is everyone's doing the best job that they can. And I've just finished a book actually on the Four Agreements, and it's about shamanic journeys, and there's some amazing things in there, but they say that every generation thinks they know more than the last, and so we almost look down. And I think now with social media and technology, it's even easier for us to go to our parents, you don't know what it's like, you don't understand why I'm on Instagram and Facebook, my dad thinks it's ridiculous, like he's just and I'm like, well, you don't really, you're not really seen unless you're on social media. So I try and explain all of these things. But actually, I think if we understood a bit more about their experiences, then I think we would have a lot more empathy. And I think one of the presents that a friend said they're getting their parents for Christmas is a book that's it's called Tell Me Your Story, Mum, Tell Me Your Story, Dad, Tell Me Your Story, Gran. And it's basically, you gift them a book and it asks them lots of questions about their life and they fill it in. And I thought this is an amazing way for me to then read that book and ask them in future conversations, rather than talking about UK politics and mortgage rates and, all the kind of things that are going on. I can now talk about their experiences. And I know that there is also some gems that they've passed on, but you can kind of forget that sometimes, I think, when you're seeing them age and become more maybe mentally rigid, and you're trying to change how you think, open your mind, be a bit more conscious. So I was just going to say, do you still get a lot of eye rolling from friends and family as you're trying to keep your inner peace? Or
I think it would be, any eye rolling that does happen is less subject based and more approach, because we don't really explain or justify our approach.
okay.
I think our parents definitely, over the last 5 years, especially since COVID, have gone on their own journey of redefining their concept of self-sovereignty, where they're drawing their identity and their power from. You know, it's sort of correlated. If somebody feels more empowered within their own self-esteem and their relationships, their interest in the sort of bittiness around world affairs, politics, the conditions of the environment lessen because they're less relevant to that mindset all of a sudden. So I think that we personally don't experience that, and we get told quite a lot that people wish that they would have that support network around them, or at least a place in their family where they could have conversations of that nature about, you know, either what's bigger in life or the inner world of people, you know, because I literally, I just want to smash my head against the wall when people start talking about stuff like that, because I really don't care. And I have to sometimes hold myself back from making that so obvious, because sometimes that's the only in that people have to build rapport, is to talk about the weather, or, you know, and we're both quite, like, we love a laugh, but we're both quite deep as well. So it's that whole spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly difficult, you know, in any relationship, you know, if we were to zoom out onto a soul level, put age aside, and it was just like soul to soul, ultimately, the question is like, how can I love you and how can I love me at the same time? And, you know, when we're talking about generational, intergenerational habits, beliefs, patterns, and all that jazz, right? You know, there's quite often we only focus on the burdens. And of course, there are many gifts wrapped up in that too. And, you know, just like you've said about feeling challenged, you know, in being your authentic self with your family, like the same happens with the kids, in as much as they, like, on a soul level, everyone will challenge you and push on places where, you know, you're in separation and you're not being your truest, most loving self, if that makes sense. In it's
Love is quite a challenging force. It's not a passive
incredibly difficult
experience. So, you know, it's going to reveal to you where your scaffolding isn't naturally very robust. And also, you know, it is a real opportunity and a gift to highlight within yourself where you're still outsourcing something that could be robust within you. But it's very difficult to do that with somebody who doesn't want to have that conversation. And it's a bit like those memes that go around, you know, about that older generation. Tell me you have autism without telling me you have autism. You know, all of these, like, the world's, all of these people, they're all flaky. Those older generations say that. And then, you know, if you take away their special soup spoon, they're crying. Or, you know, if you don't wipe your feet appropriately, or, you know, put the hand soap back, it's like, I can kind of see some of the pain in those older generations of the gilded cage that they live in because of the shame about the lies that they were sold. You know, it's not an easy thing to reconcile that you've been mugged off, and it's even less easy to be vulnerable and being seen in that. And I think that there's a kind of opportunity for that to be a leveler for everybody and go, look, we've inherited this mess, but our hearts are still beating and we're still holding a flame to love. Like, that's pretty miraculous, I think, in today's world, and worth celebrating, because people have been through a lot. And it's easy for our generation, you know, born in the late 80s or the 90s, to really, you know, it's quite a unique thing. Even most of Europe has experienced war or pestilence or famine or some sort of natural disaster, whereas, like, a lot of the Western culture and Western spirituality is quite isolated in just how easy it's got it. That being said, it's all relative. So, you know, people who do feel really oppressed in terms of their identity and expression, I guess that's another reason why we do the work we do, because it doesn't matter where you came from. It just matters what team you're batting for now, which is like, everybody can be powerful. And, that's quite a disturbing and blasphemous thought within most family networks, that you could be powerful and that's not going to affect my ability to feel powerful and have dominion over myself. Actually, it might enrich it, but it's more a sense of modeling. We haven't really been given the best models
Yeah,
as,
yeah.
as people, as a culture.
I think it's interesting there when you mention about love, because also I think that for me, I started to almost feel like slightly numb and disassociated. The sicker I got, the more fearful of the future, the more stressed out with work and just seeing social media. And earlier when you mentioned kind of being truth seekers, Matt and I have also been very similar in that we only ever want to communicate the truth, but then we look around in our industry and there's lots of lies being told, and then that's where everyone seems to be following, because it's more interesting, it's very extreme, and we're like, no, it's hard watching everyone be misled. But I think as I got more and more kind of disillusioned with everything, I started to lose my ability to even feel, and then I realized that actually kind of fear and maybe just not having the right tribes around you was a bit of a part of that. And slowly it's taken a while, and again with meditation and other practices that I've found, everything from kind of somatic styles of yoga, breathwork, like lots of things that I've tried. We'll talk about tools in a second, or modalities, but I very much feel that fear, you can't almost stop me from feeling love, because I was like, this is never going to end well. There's so much to be fearful of, and if I love fiercely, then I'll be hurt fiercely as well. And that was even to the point of going, my parents, I'm going to lose them soon, so I should probably start to pull back. It was a kind of a strange experience, but then the more I actually went into not fearing any of this, and understanding that it's inevitable, but also there were other things that came to me in that journey that have made me think there's no point in fearing any of it. Like, you don't need to, it's nothing to be scared of, actually. And then, like you've said, you can kind of start to take your power back and speak your truth and stand up and not be fearful of what people say, which is another thing that was keeping me or pushing me further down. So I think it's to love, you have to go there and feel the hard stuff as well, and not be scared of that, and not let that intimidate you. And that, as I just said, it's a combination of grief and things that you maybe haven't been feeling over the years. You've kept busy, you've kept distracted, and I think this is a big factor of social media, is we're now more connected than ever, yet feeling completely disconnected. So we can see what everyone is doing, but it's the show reel and the highlight reel, and so it doesn't make us feel kind of like we belong, essentially. That's how it's sold to us in a way, I guess, social media.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, real connection is based on intimacy. And if we break down intimacy into UIC, it requires us to be vulnerable and raw. That's what builds connection. And I feel like there is a real fatigue on social media, especially within our industry, where people are more aware of, perhaps not always in the most conscious of ways, but where like it's actually not real, that level of perfection. And I don't quite know what the other word is, but it's not like,
You're not trying to reach a closed end state. That's always going to create anxiety. What does an
yeah,
anxious mind look for? It looks for definition, doesn't it? As opposed to an unfolding. So it's incredibly difficult for people to feel safe in that. But I also think it's kind of like one of those things where people really have to recognize how sick of it they are. Social media is the only sort of media stream which gives you a feed of other people's lives. It's not even a place to really search efficiently for information or inspiration that you would require, So it's what it's done to people's minds, I think you could talk about all day long. Do I think there's any point? Probably not, because everyone understands that you have to learn to use it for whatever you wish. But, I think I can sympathize with what you're saying as a practitioner and as professionals in this field. Obviously, we go through those ups and downs of self-belief as well. And when you're on social media, and you're looking at people who are talking absolute rubbish, almost being exalted in a way, that has always put me off. I went to religious schools. I loved praying, but church, the guy talking never really seemed to be embodied in his message. And I'm pretty good at sniffing that out from a mile off. That doesn't mean that you're always going to be 100% embodied in your message. It's more like a working masterpiece unfolding, but these kind of cute aphorisms and sayings, and they just become mental axes that people wield against themselves. It's quite tragic. And I think that definitely the women and also the feminine aspect of the psyche in general is more susceptible to that sort of self-punitive hauling yourself over the coals looking for perfection, when really obviously that's an inhibitor to the sensuality that's needed to move the nervous system into embodiment, whether in a woman or a man. That receptive and feminine part of a man is just as responsive to that sort of self-criticism. And you see that in old male culture now, where the idea is to be fit and strong, but like, what are you actually being fit and strong for? What's your mission? And where's the legacy? Because without that, what are we doing? We're just polishing our coffins, aren't we? Like, it's pretty dark.
I thought, yeah, no, I completely agree. But both Matt and I talk about this like constantly in terms of, I was saying when I have a week of coaching, I almost feel I need to set up like I don't know if it's a retreat or just some kind of little village for exhausted and knackered mums who have just completely, see all this stuff on social media, use it to judge themselves, are already over delivering immensely, have lost confidence, lost faith, and can only see more of that crap in the future. And actually, what I often start to say to them is that everything starts with taking back a bit of time. And if you can take that time into nature, I think it's even more awesome, and start to do some reflection. And that's kind of, I think, where the basic start, because as you've said on your website, it was a really lovely statement about most of us have, the wisdom within, and can be the creator at the end of the day of our own power, our own life. But we've completely lost that understanding and that knowledge. And this is where I think the quiet time, the being in nature, the meditation is where we start to call upon, okay. And it was only as another friend of mine who used to sit and meditate and ask questions. And I was like, oh, you ask questions? No, I just listen. I'm just listening and trying not to chatter away. And then gradually I've started to ask questions. And some of your meditations are based on questions or based on higher power guides, and actually kind of reaching out and asking for some guidance. But I think also, if you haven't got your eyes open, then you don't see some of the messages that are being sent your way. And so again, the more that you practice that, and I can't emphasize enough, I was that person that said, I'll never meditate. My mind is so busy. I love working. I love running. I love cramming my day with being busy. And it's come, and I think it's there for everybody, but we just have to go on a bit of a journey to find it, What do you often suggest? Sorry, I was going to say, what do you suggest to people to start, and like what practices do you think really help with this journey?
I think that all of these tips, tools, and tricks are really pointing towards an experience of self. So what I would say to anybody at this point now, to sort of shortcut and save them a whole lot of hassle, is that it's never the technique, it's just what it's pointing to. So, there's a pragmatic element of that. If you want to meditate, your mind is crazy busy, expecting to sit down on a Sunday evening going, right, this is the week I meditate, and planning and putting all that pressure to do 20, 25, 30 minutes meditation every day. That's not, your mind's not going to like that. You've been feeding the beast one way, so you kind of got to tease it back, and that's part of the learning how to sensate, I guess, with your own body, reconnecting to that. So I think there's this meta element where you're redefining what your relationship is to that, why it's important, valuing it. But there's also this really micro element of, okay, I've got this to do this week. I'm already immersed in this trajectory. Like, I can't just immediately halt my life. I think that this sometimes happens with extreme changes to the nervous system. That could be grief, etc., big life events, but it could also be a bit of an untethered or a heavy pushing breath work session, or yoga people do it where they try to push their physiology so far one way that quite naturally the subconscious reaction is course correct and spring back the other way. It's really that force and understanding your own undulations and pendulations, why you're kicking back. You know, you mentioned there about family dynamics. It would be nice to be all namaste and get everything right 100% of the time, but sometimes it's just appropriate to get angry, to snap, to lay it on the line. It might not be pretty, but it's what's available to you in that moment. And if you don't take what's available to you and what you're capable of, you'll always be putting your transformation on a pedestal. So that's the idea, really.
And always be afraid that you'll lose it.
Yeah, because you're trying to maintain it from a place of effort and force, whereas actually, I think from everything you've said, what you're getting from the vibe of our work is that, you know, it's this balance between you are good enough and also embracing that desire to grow, because nature doesn't stand still, does it? It's not just in some sort of static harmony. It's pushing, it's pulling, it's dreaming, it's growing, it's dying, it's receding. And I think the biggest advice I would give somebody is that, like you said about pulling it back from working out and physical training, you can't do it all at once, and you don't have to grow in every direction all at once either. So it's always just coming back to the breath is the base rhythm of life, isn't it? So it's not just about breathing. For me, I think I'm really interested in help people understand the physiology of their own breathing. You know, when you've done a meditation with me, 5 minutes in, breathing, you know, there is magic there, don't get me wrong, in you, in me, in that shared space. But also the blood's getting into the intercostal muscles. You're starting to release all sorts of things, and the body hormonally is coming back online. It's self-orientation. If you can give the body that feedback of I am here, and that's what relationship does as well, right? Like, you know, hugging, cuddling, talking, communicating. If your body knows where it is, pretty much everything else sorts itself out.
Do I actually have obviously because I'd fallen sick, you the first thing I logically did was like, if I do all this stuff similar to you, Rebecca, I was like, I will get better. This condition will go, my digestive issues. And it hasn't, but that's, I think, been part of the journey that I wanted to stay, because what has changed firstly is every day I feel better. My life, the quality of life is like 100% better. I can't even like, because I'm able to cope with symptoms and things. But one of the things that happened recently was I always do a blood work once a year, and all my hormones have come back up. So everyone told me to be really patient, and I just thought actually they'd flatlined after COVID, and I just thought, well, there's one thing that I can now say physiologically has come as a result of meditations, breath work, but also, as you've just said, it's not that 15 minutes every morning is doing that. It's what that provides for me for the rest of the day, and the stopping and the consciousness, and the I can be in company and suddenly realize I'm like, you know, just suddenly tensed, you know, and it's like braced, ready for something. And so working on perceptions, and, you know, as you've just said, the company that you're keeping. And it's not that you have to go and hibernate away from everybody when you're doing this. It's actually good to go into situations, but stay with self. And again, that's where I found things like just putting my hand on my chest has been like a nice kind of just touching here and saying, stay with yourself here. Don't start to shapeshift and say what you think people want you to say. Don't start to, especially I'm in a new country meeting new people, you know, so it's very easy to start to go put on a smiley face, or, you know, appear as people perhaps, or you think people want you to appear. So I think, and it has started to come more naturally and innately across the day now, and that's but it's taken a long time. I'm nearly 6 months in, so patience was the big, I had to just keep saying that word, like it's not my strong point.
It goes so much against, like, what did I call it the other day? Oh, like Amazon Prime healing. It's like it drives me potty. It absolutely does. It takes such a long time, and it is also a lifelong practice. There is always going to be more to discover about yourself. There's always going to be fluctuations in your health because of life. because of stress. Like, there's always going to be stuff going on, but the fundamental difference is that we see people shift through is feeling like life happens to them, to life happens for them and through them. And, you know, just a really important piece of, you know, if you're someone that's on your journey of healing, it's to know that there are the perfect people and the perfect treatment. And when I say perfect, I don't mean that it's going to fix everything, but what I mean that it's the perfect medicine for exactly what you need in that moment is always available. And you have to just ask for help and be open and available and allow yourself to be guided, because the body is so intelligent. I could weep at the brilliance of it. But because everybody's system is unique, there's no real cookie cutter approach or best modality or best supplement or any of that stuff. It really is your own inner compass that will guide you to the right things, the right people, the right places. And just, you know, it's following the breadcrumbs. What works for you and a season with one particular healer won't be who you need for the rest of your life. It will change as you grow and evolve.
I was going to say, I'd love to know, I think that's amazing, by the way, but just thinking of myself in the listener's position now. So they may or may not have children, which, you know, creates huge amounts of time responsibility. So obviously there's demands start and end of the day and over the weekends. Then you've also got jobs, maybe working 8 hours, maybe working at home, maybe you're juggling the two, so you're doing the school run and then working later. Got some male clients who are kind of also really into triathlons and training all the time, but they're noticing their digestive system isn't feeling too good, or they've got joint problems. Where does somebody start, and what does that look like, and how much time? Because time gets, Matt and I both say this every day, clients go, no time, no time, no time. Where do you think, and how much should they devote initially, and how could they start to, I think everyone wants what you guys have and what you are talking about, but absolutely no idea. They don't even feel like they have the map, I think is the best way to put it, let alone the compass. You know, so
I think in the first instance, people are intimidated maybe about their perception of the level of change that they have to enact. What we find is that if you just trim up and make a few adjustments with what you've already got going on, you will create so much space for yourself. That could be adapting. This could be really simple things like fixing that thing on the car that you've been putting off, or clearing out the kitchen cupboard that's just an absolute mess that you've wanted to put your juicer or your blender in, organizing things so you're making it easier for yourself. Quite often people have like a hole in their love bucket, shall we say, and that can represent itself in terms of energy, love, and even money as well. So there's things that people can adjust that they already know they want to. So quite often why people don't do that is to do with the decision of fatigue associated with overstimulation and anxiety. So just a little bit better every day is actually where the miraculous gold can be found. You already know some of those changes. So there might be a change that's really scary and a change that's not so scary. Do the one that's not so scary. What I would say, I mean, this is a good metaphor with inner child work and some of that stuff that we all have and we carry. Quite often we think we've got to go in like a really stern, sort of this idea of authority and discipline, and like we would look at a teacher, or even how we're taught to look at scientists and politicians. They know more than us, so we must concede. Your inner child, your hurt places, your disempowered places are not going to respond to that. So going in with a really bolshy, we're going to sort our lives out now attitude, it's going to scare that part of you off. It wants to be invited. It's looking to come out to play, but like a child, it's a little bit afraid to. It doesn't know where its place is within the world. rather than feigning competence, and this is something that makes such a difference, rather than feigning competence and trying to bolsh your way through your own transformation, just give up the ghost a bit and go, oh, well, you know, I don't know the whole picture, but I do know this little sliver. And we can start there. We can exercise to ourselves this evidence that we can take action and make changes. And then that's going to make your mind have more plasticity naturally as those hemispheres come into better cohesion. And then, of course, you're going to be able to seek help. And seeking help is not really, I'm in deficit. It's going, okay, I can feel I'm more. How do I get there? Start with the how rather than the why, because you might get a bit too confused about, you know, I mean, you wake up in a meat suit every morning. Like, it's crazy enough. The trees grow, the birds chirp. We could all do with chilling out a little bit about it all, would be my advice.
I think that's also interesting what you were saying about as the mind body space is kind of growing quite a lot now. People are going back and having kind of talking therapy for things like childhood trauma and thinking about it, but then it becomes a label, and then it becomes a badge that's worn. And so what Matt and I are finding is people are coming to us and saying, you can't tell me what to do because I had this happen. And it's almost like, I know they call it oppositional defiant disorder, but, and clients are saying these words to us like, I have this, I have ADHD, OCD, ODD, you know what I mean? And it's like, so you have to tell me what to do and coach me, but you can't tell me this, this, and this because this will trigger this. And it's almost like there's an awareness, but I'm not sure it's helping people in a lot of ways. And that's why I think sometimes I often talk about our cell membrane, which basically needs a certain amount of rigidity and a certain amount of flexibility, and to make chemicals, to receive nutrition, to communicate something, it has to have, and this is where omega-3/6 comes in, and the fats in our diet are important. But think of this on a more macro level of the body and the brain. It's like we need a certain amount of rigidity in terms of, you know, being overly flexible and just not doing anything isn't helping, but then also, and kind to yourself and self-care. And we can be too kind and suddenly we've eaten, you know, half a kilo of dairy milk and watch Netflix for 5 hours being kind to ourselves, but feel awful.
You've been watching me.
Yeah. Tell that story, honestly.
Yeah, it's all of a sudden.
Okay.
You've got to be willing to drop the story. And so it's, you know, and underneath, you know, quite a lot of those labels and stuff is a lot of victimhood and helplessness, you know. So there has to be space for that to come along too. But first of all, you have to be honest enough to recognize that that's how you feel, and that is a subconscious you know, motivation to guardedness and self-protection, and, you know, a lot of the shame that, you know, isn't internalized through, you know, past experiences. But, you know, the past doesn't define you. It isn't who you are. And, you know, an analogy that I often use is that, like, we turn those wounds, so like they're not gaping and oozy and pussy and bloody, but they've actually just turned into a scar that's like nice and silvery. Like it's still there, it's still part of you, but like we haven't got, you know, this, it like leaking all the day long, or there is a threat that it's just gonna like boom on you, like, you know, when you're having a really lovely moment. Because I really feel that a lot of people are afraid of that. Like something happens and they feel like it just lurks in the background all of the time, and one day it's going to get them again.
I hear that a lot, actually. It always goes wrong for me is a really common statement with people who have lots of different chronic health issues. And I'm like, well, that kind of just reaffirms the fear state. And I think it's helpful to know that, of course, something is going to happen. Like, we're not invincible, and you're going to go through, as we said, there will be darker experiences, but to really actually feel the lightness, and by that I mean like to truly feel joy and happiness and laugh out loud again, you kind of have to accept that there's going to be some darker times as well. But that is the journey that we go on. And it's, again, I'd say one thing about our parents' generation is they didn't seem as fearful. Like that's just kind of not, I don't mean in terms of they are when it comes to things like politics, but they seem to be a bit more kind of accepting of the fact that there'll be tragic situations happen, whereas it's almost like because we hear it so much, we're so connected to media, we think nothing but tragic situations happen. So I just think sometimes the focus has shifted maybe slightly. I don't know if you see a similar thing.
Yeah, I would see a similar thing. I think we sort of connect to that through the wisdom of, you know, alive and dead, the older members of our family, and the appreciation of the subtle, longer rhythms and magic of life, in the sense that, you know, there really could be nothing at all to talk about, to look at, to taste, to touch. And I do feel that those older generations do have an appreciation, probably born out of the living memory of hardship, you know, and the sort of sensory exposure to their world. They grew up in houses with without central heating, without double glazing.
Outside toilet.
Your dad was telling me about you had to run a choke in a car to put the right level of fuel when I didn't know that. He was, and so all of these
I actually
things.
remember my mum doing that. So
Yeah.
I'm older than you guys.
Come out, yeah.
And that very process connects you to the reality of what's physically going on within that engine, you know. So all of this button on, go, that's not how reality works. That's not how you grow food, for example. You can't approach nature with that process. And obviously, nutritionally, in treating nature and agriculture in that way, you're seeing that health and physiological kickback, that you can't just spray a field and wipe out the flora and fauna without it having an effect. And I think one thing, like you're saying, some of that overemphasis on politics and world order of that generation is because of certain guilt about how compliant, you know, people complain about things now, but, you know, there's also a large part of that generation, older generation, that has checked out, that isn't fulfilling its tribal role, that wants and is quite happy with the value that they put on their house to take a Norwegian cruise and not really care about the grandkids. That is a sickness of our culture too. You know, it's not all on the young people. A lot of those older people just didn't. Yeah, I don't know what they're playing at. I don't know what they're playing at. No. But that's my opinion. You know.
We could debate this for another hour, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Like again, clients often talk about privilege guilt to me, and I think we all know we have it easier than ever, yet feel this disconnect and this emptiness, and that's what people report back. And I often highlight, but then how much time do you spend gathering more stuff? Like that's the problem, because of how powerful consumerism and marketing and advertising is, and it's everywhere on social media. And I often say one of the first steps is ditch the apps, get them off the phone, stop spending hours scrolling looking for another, you know, kind of gym top and whatever that you really don't need, or sit and ask yourself, do I really need this? Is this like a, you know, life or death situation? And use that time, buy your time back, as you two said before. Once you start to buy time back, just gradually, by going, I'm not buying any more crap. You know, I'm going to stop all this. I'm not hunting for more answers online. I'm going to stop Dr. Googling everything that I experience and outsourcing my health to a 15-minute GP appointment. Like I'm going to, you know, take back the power, essentially take ownership again. I think that in itself, I know for me, brought me back so much time that I was like, it's all distraction, and I don't judge myself for doing it. It was like escaping pain at the time and trying to feel proactive and maybe slightly validated in some way, but it didn't serve me, and in 5 years of it, I was exhausted by it in the end. So you know, I think everyone is getting there. And so when people talk about privilege guilt, that's the sort of thing that you can start changing day by day by day in the decisions that you make, where you shop, what you buy, you know, who you give your time to, and you know what car you drive, what house you live in, all sorts of things. So and gradually, I think from the ground up will change a lot of that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's the same for what you're saying, you guys, about labels, you know, this question of who's consuming who in these models and these patterns. So sometimes those labels do give people a place of orientation where they can recognize and self-recognize what works for them. However, there seems to be across the board within wellness and mental health this misconception that the world has to adjust to your particular presets and what works for you. You know, you could have all the conditions in the world. If you go to dig a hole in the ground, the soil's not going to make allowances for you. It's going to be an element of hard work. It's going to be an element of activation energy. But this is where we kind of found this pathway back to this larger part of us and spirituality, is that actually the way in which you approach, the way in which you see yourself within the material world, obviously then has massive implications on your value system. Because if you're a person who knows you're more than a body or a soul, suddenly your values become more important to you than just this life, just the idea of preserving this identity. And like you say, that's really how you can make grassroots change.
I love that. And I think a lot of people and couples and families, one of the best things I think they could sit and do is a little value session, you know, like, and I'm sure children would be actually probably wiser than the adults in some of that, in what they would feed back as a family value. And from them, and I have just done this, we've then started to look at the structure of our week and everything from the hours that we're working, what we do with our free time, and then budgets that back all of that up so that we're not spending a lot of money. That means we have to work excessive hours to make money. Do you see, you know, and it all, that little bit of a time, that little bit of time set aside to do a little audit like that. I think not audit, it's not the right word, a little, I don't know, like a brainstorming session that you all come together, I think can be amazing. And if you then stick it on the fridge, it's just that little kind of visual reminder of like the journey that you're all going on together.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm conscious of time. I'd love you to just let people know, I think just a little summary of the types of people that come to you and work with you would be really nice. And then also just where can people find you? What is your offering? Social media handles, etc.
So I specialize in women's health. So I've been doing conscious fertility and that whole rite of passage with women into motherhood for 7 years now. I proudly have 100% success rate for fertility for those that have unexplained infertility. So, and I think that roughly falls at about 33% of the population have no reason why they're infertile. And so they are my people. But I also work closely with just women who want to move out of people pleasing and fawning and really feel safe in themselves, and work through, you know, just feeling more spacious in themselves, befriending their body, and just knowing who they are. And I would say that soul energies, which is me and you, really blends that beautifully with a much more spiritual approach where we kind of unfilter our knowledge of the cosmos and, you know, shamanic practices, and it's a bit more woo.
Yeah,
That's what I would say.
that's what you'd say. Yeah, I suppose I'd agree. Whether that be from, you know, the things that we talk about with soul energies, or indeed the sound baths that we do, very much in the style of this conversation. It's all very like, I think it can be quite disarming for people who come to events expecting to be able to be really stern and rigid, set their crystals out, and, you know, serious, you know, obviously that can be quite disarming if you rock up and it's just me and you laughing, but playing, you know, I've got to say, beautifully as well. So I work with all sorts of people, and more with people all around the world as well, given the reach of my meditations on apps, etc. I think a common thread would be those with a burgeoning sense that they have unrealized dreams within them. So this could be dreams within their community, dreams within their relationships, their family, but also professional and creative dreams, things that they really want to land. One of the things that I never set out to specialize in, but has become increasingly prevalent in my work, is working with people with extreme psychological and sort of sexual trauma, and helping them repattern their feelings and themselves into a sense of safety. But also, really, I think the overarching thing would be a trust of self, whether it be dealing with people with histories of abuse, or perhaps they've just been overlooked all of their life. I am really here, born out of my own journey, for those underdogs who actually have masses to add to the world. Quite a lot of people seem to get into situations and histories within their life where they feel disempowered. But then when we pick it apart just a little bit, you can see once again that question, who's consuming who? A lot of those people who are downtrodden are some of the most sensitive and brilliant people that you will ever meet. So quite often it's about me personally, I suppose, as a man and a male energy, both for men and women, advocating for that part of them and going, hey, I see you. You're doing a great job, you know. And then pushing them and prodding them a little bit and saying, what do you want next? You know, what can you dream of next? Now you've done this, what can you dream up next? You know, and just happy to be walking with somebody's journey for that period of time. But I think also within Soul Energies and what we do together and what we bridge is very much about the community, very much about the family, and very much about being and bringing that inner union as a practice into your relationship too, because I think this unit of two, as I think you feel with your, you know, in your partnership too, is really, you know, that first unit from which we can actually take change and build robust structures that hold us all in the world that we want to be held in.
It's the new currency of health. I
Yeah.
absolutely 100% believe that with every inch of my body.
You know, I completely agree, and it's really interesting. Actually, Matt and I were talking. We're both on similar journeys, and he's doing a mentorship. It's called Awakened Man, and so we're both kind of doing things and feeding back. And we've both said we would struggle if we weren't on that journey together. And you know, work with clients where you can see one person is just kind of found this kind of comfort zone and is not going to move, but again has that mental rigidity of values and not going to change. And then you can see I was in a previous relationship where I just knew, I was like, none of this serves me. I have all these dreams and I'm just feel like I'm shackled here. And in the end I did break it and go, and it was you know, one of the best things I ever did in terms of change my career, change my job, everything changed, you know, as a result of that. And I read recently that women's circles and men's circles are growing like exponentially, I think, because people want connection and support to go and make brave decisions. And as you said, really, even those that are struggling with chronic illness and trauma are the bravest people we know. And once there's, you know, a little bit of coaching and support, it's incredible what you see comes out the other side. But I have to say to Matt, you just need that hand on your shoulder. Like that has just been such a powerful thing for me, or just someone takes my hand, and that's happened physically in certain sessions. And yeah, but I like that I gifted a friend one of your sound baths, by the way, and she said absolutely amazing. And I just, if you are in the area, listeners, please do go. She said it was incredible, and that actually made me realize I need to buy more gifts like that for friends. Like I don't buy happy stuff anymore, but we should all kind of gift experiences like that might take someone on a journey or get them to just a little bit of self-care that then gets them thinking and could just plant the seed of a very different future, I think. And it's a connection as well. So books, I often buy books or, you know, kind of experiences now for people, but that's yeah, I highly recommend. Take it online and then we can all turn up for
Yeah, right. Well, I think something that really sets Soul Energies apart is that we are coming to the people that we meet as peers. You know, we're just saying, hey, we've got these things ticked off in our life and the way that we're approaching the world, and we can share that with you so that you can benefit from it. And then whatever your particular flair is, I want you to share that too. We're both so into people's talents and gifts, because that's the creatrix part of all of this, right? And as you're saying, in partnership, you can really support each other in that. And I think it's worthy to remember, you know, we're quite traditional in the sense of like legacy and family, but also this inner alchemy that you're going through and these different expressions of masculine and feminine that are now possible within a relationship. Like you got to give yourself a break. You know, we're all making this up as we go along, and we're all trying to leave something better for those after us, you know. So it's all a bit of trial and error, where that's where the humor comes in, right? It makes it easier.
yeah. And the compassion to self, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I've really loved this chat, and I hope our listeners
Oh,
can.
wait.
Yeah,
I know, like, not everybody is all sometimes there in terms of. Matt said on our last session, you know, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and I hope it doesn't take, like it did with me, like chronic illness to get you there. You know, I hope most people can come to this journey a bit more pleasurably than I did, but even if you just take concepts of what you guys have spoken about and build your own version and build your own belief system, I think it's definitely a game changer in terms of your, as I've said, your mental emotional health, your confidence in the future. And then again, that starts to gradually change the decisions that you make across the day, and maybe bigger ones in life. So thank you so much for sharing that. And listeners, I highly recommend that you check out Soul Energies and follow you both on Instagram, and yeah, and if you can, make it to a sound bath.
You got it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Keris. It's been a pleasure.